everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk, sponsored by Inglis and Darley. I'm Bren O'Brien, and joining me as usual is Tim Rowe. Today, the big farms determine their stallion fees. We have an extended interview with Alastair Pulford from Darley, reflect on announcements from Arrowfield and others. In breeding, Darlingview dives in with a new stallion, and Cambridge goes back to the shuttle market. In racing, the VRC switches beers, the winning run of Jigsaw, changes in the Triple Crown, and the value of a fillies and mares at Group 1. While in wagering, changes at Sportsbet, in-play betting gets a boost, NZ turnover on the slide, and AI's use in wagering. Tim, let's get straight into it. We'll go to our chat with Alastair Pulford in a second, but obviously Darley confirmed this week that 2 of their 3-year-old colts will retire, while just today they've released their 2006 fees. Before we get into our chat with Alastair, sort of your broader impressions of sort of what do we learn from, I guess, Darley's decisions this week?
Look, to me, it doesn't surprise that they've made those decisions. 10 Tyrus, we put the question to Alastair about the commercial realities, and which you'll hear in a second. But to make this all balanced, and I saw some numbers, rough numbers from Bruce Slade put out that sort of, Get Off probably needs to try and get back 20 million a year to make it, as Alastair says, wash its face. So, doing that is through top-class stallions or highly commercial stallions, of which they've got 3 off the track at the moment. 10 Tyrus Observer might be a little bit tougher, but I think he's a very good racehorse. And Baywalk, which they've kept racing on next season. So they've decided to bring 2 to start, and that doesn't surprise me. Observer, as we said, he had an injury problem. I did hear sort of probably a similar bruising issue perhaps to say what Celestial Legend might have had, but the talent was there. We saw that in the spring. We saw it with Celestial Legend when he won a Randwick Guineas. It's just, if you've got that problem, and I'm not a vet, it's very hard to get on top of just that compounding, the work that required, particularly if middle distance horses, the amount of work they require. So it's a sensible decision to retire him, and he'll be, I think, a good option. If I had a mare and the money, I'd probably send him a mare. I think to race particularly, I think he was a very good horse and perhaps underrated by some. Yeah, and there's not that many first season stallions this year, so 10 Tyrus is top of the pops, clearly, be highly commercial. It was fast, had a turn of foot, so for commercial side point of view, tick a lot of boxes, dare I say that, use that cliche.
Yep, and here's our extended chat with Alastair Pulford from Darley about their decisions and sort of where they found their stallion roster for 2026.
And this week, Darley confirmed that 2 of their 3-year-olds have been retired, 10 Tyrus and Observer, and today they've released their full roster for 2026, and we're joined by Darley's head of stallions, Alastair Pulford. Thanks for joining us, Alastair.
No problem. Thanks, Tim. Nice to be with you.
Yeah. I spoke to Andy Mackiff, your managing director, on Monday about the 2 big guns, 10 Tyrus and Observer. We'll get into the horses themselves in a second, but I'm sure you wouldn't have missed. It did cause quite a stir that they had such a following, those 2 horses, and the punters, wanted them to race on. But can you talk us through the commercial realities of any huge racing business, particularly Godolphin and Darley, about how it works, and that, yes, even with your Dubai backing, it does need to balance the books to at least a significant degree.
Yeah, and look, we're not exceptional in retiring 3-year-old colts. It's very few go on to race. I mean, we have been the exception where we've seen the horse can either add value or soundness, temperament, all those things come into a decision to whether to retire or to race, plus commercial reality, and it's very few colts these days get to race on a 4, whether it's in Australia, England, all over the world. That's just the reality. Occasionally we do it. Obviously with Animo, we saw that there was potential upside. We thought there was unfinished business, and so we raced on, and God bless him, he delivered for us. But we just looked at it long, hard, and look, they're not easy decisions by any means, but those were the decisions we made in the interests of the business and of the horses, to be honest. Their welfare obviously, is first and foremost, always. So that was, those were the decisions we made. And I don't, look, it's, we all love to see them go around on Saturdays, but, it's a multi-million-dollar business that has to wash its face at the very least. And yeah, those are the decisions we came to.
And Observer, again, speaking to Andy and from what I'd heard elsewhere, he pretty much made the decision for you. I know it would have been great to see him potentially Cox Plates, possibly Caulfield Cups, things like that. But my understanding is he did have a bit of an injury that probably wouldn't have resolved itself straight away, that, it was just better off him going to stud now.
Yeah, I'm not involved in the day-to-day decisions and the day-to-day management of the racehorses. Obviously, the stallions are my business. But yeah, I mean, he probably did make that decision for the racing team. He certainly would have needed a lengthy spell, from what I believe, and missed a lot of his 4-year-old career potentially anyway. So yeah, he was a super talented horse. Yes, I mean he did make that decision for us. Probably made it easier, but he's probably he is one that might have raced on in different circumstances. But as I said, welfare's first, and you don't want to see these horses come to any harm.
Yeah, just sort of on pricing those horses, Alastair. I mean, when you work through a new horses coming in and with the record, and obviously there's a marketability about them as well, but it's probably fair to say at the moment it's a fairly restrained market for stallion fees. Most stallion fees, unless a horse has had exceptional results or whatever else, are sort of are coming back down, or at least staying where they are. I mean, how did you guys sort of find your mark on that to go, okay, well, Tentaris at 88, Observer 33 seems about right. I mean, how do you guys come through that process?
Oh, look, it's just it's a knowledge of the market and what'll bear comparison with similar horses. All I can say is I think we've underpriced them. Just judging by the interest, we could have got a lot more. But there is a sort of a dearth of Australian horses, Australian Group 1 horses going to stud this year. These are from my knowledge, the only multiple Group 1 winning colts that'll go to stud that are Australian, bred and raced. So they're rare beasts in themselves, and obviously, the local market loves local horses, and they're the ones that they've seen race. So yeah, we certainly were reasonably conservative in our pricing, and as I said, judging by the level of interest in both colts, we could have gone a bit harder. But I think you've got to be able to sustain the price for a few years. I mean, it's well known that everyone wants to get on the first season stallion, but we've got our job is to price them at a level where they want to go for years 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, inevitably there's a little bit of a discount generally in years 2, 3, and 4. But if you get them right in the first year, you can generally hold that value or very close to that value. So that's what we're aiming to do.
Yeah, I guess you're probably in a position, not a luxury, but you're saying before, like you've got the colts to go to start, and I guess that enables you to, with a colt like Baywak, to continue on with him and obviously build his record a bit like his sire did Bivouac. So it gives you an opportunity to continue with those horses, doesn't that, Alistair?
Yeah, absolutely. And Baywak, I mean, he proved on Saturday last that he is a really good colt. I mean, he beat a top class field the other day. He's very exciting. I love these horses that go that run from the front, and he makes his own luck. He's a very, very nice prospect for us as a 4-year-old, and he'll find his way into the stallion barn after that.
I think one of the proven stallions now that's coming back, which would be exciting for the market, is Gayeth, of course, the sire of Observer and quite a few other stakes winners and talented horses, at a significantly higher fee of 88,000 compared to, I think he was 30,000 when he was
25.
25. There you go. Great value in hindsight. That year off, there is precedent, particularly with Darley, that you can have a year off and still make a big impact with some of those stallions.
Absolutely, I know, especially with a horse with a bit of stamina in their makeup. Street Cry had 2 years off, didn't stop him producing winks. And so we've done it before, we'll do it again. I mean, these shuttle horses, you've got to have the best interests of the horse I keep coming back to, best interests of the horse at heart, and they're not machines. And Gaiath had covered a huge book of mares last year in the UK, and they decided that to give him 6 months off, give him a spell, and but obviously the results have come in the meantime to suggest that he had to come back, and come back he does at a much higher fee, as you say. But he has proven himself a very, very exciting stallion, and I think think the market's ripe. I think we've sort of gone down this path, of concentrating on sprinter, essentially sprinters, because we're so well known for it, and 2-year-old speed. But I think there's just that appetite coming back in the market for a horse like Gareth, and when they do hit their straps like he has, I mean, they're not that straightforward to get going in the first place. And Observer really, I mean, sorry, I keep calling him Observer. Gareth, for the horse he was, like, he's a multiple Group 1 winner, the best horse in the world of his era, by Dubawi, who's a superstar, out of a Group 1 winning Galileo mare. He should have been standing at 50 or 60 in the first place, but because it's stamina oriented, he comes in at 25. And it was a similar story up in the UK or in Ireland. And he has to do it off his own bat. Well, he's doing it now, and so he's getting up to probably where he should have started, to be honest, or because he looks like a very, very exciting stallion.
And another shuttle stallion who has done it the hard way, I guess, year after year, starting off at a low fee. I think it might have been 15,000 in Australia. Harry Angel, and he's up to 80,000 this year, and just very popular with owners and trainers and breeders, obviously now too. That I think you had a lot of promising horses out there. Private Harry, but stables, from country stables right through, have nice horses by Harry Angel.
Yeah, lots of them. I mean, and he's a very consistent star. He's a great, a great asset to us because he's an art cross. So, he's completely new bloodlines for Australia, and I think we need that. So we're blessed to have him. He, of course, was a highly talented horse himself. He was a champion sprinter, the best sprinter to retire to stud in Europe for 30 years, but we know how good our sprinters are, so he had to be good. But he is making it in no uncertain terms. He's got some very high-class horses around him. So, Group 1 contesters every week, whether it's Angel Capital or Tom Kitten or, any of those, War Machine, they're always about the place. And that's, Stretton Angel. There's plenty of them, and there's plenty of backup, as you say. I mean, his percentages are excellent.
It just sort of must be exciting just to see Anamo's horses get to the track this year, Alastair, in all sense. Like, it's sold really well as yearlings, like exceptional results for breeders that sort of backed him in. And I mean, I guess this is the season where I guess there's probably an opportunity for breeders to get in, knowing that if there's considerable upside next year, he's probably not going to stand at this fee again.
Yeah, that's that. I mean, look, he's been 100 grand all the way through, and you've got to be a good stallion or a good prospect to command that sort of fee. But he has had every opportunity. He covered great book of mares in his first year. That was reinforced by the way they sold. I mean, they look great, they walk beautifully. The reports from the breakers now are coming in. They all seem to move well. They've got great minds. Everything that horse does is good. He's just a freak. And he's got the obviously his own race record is superb. By Street Boss, who's now established himself as a really high class sire out of a Group 1 winning Reduced Choice mare. That's that's as good as you can get. And so, I mean, he averaged, I think, 400,000 over all the yearling sales. That's a new benchmark. That was for a lot of yearling sold. I think there were over 60 sold. So that's some credit to him and some credit to the way they looked and the mares and the people that supported him.
And Broad Sidings heading into his second season. He's obviously a son of Too Darn Hot and grandson of Dubawi, which a lot of other studs are gravitating towards. Delacroix coming down this year for Coolmore and lead artist at Arrowfield. But, he's done it here, champion 2-year-old. Again, opportunities for second season breeders potentially.
Yeah, so we've taken a little bit off his price, which we talked about earlier. That's the reality of the commercial market, and obviously having a couple of new first season guns coming in, we sort of didn't want Broadsiding to get left behind. But judging just by the interest without even telling people fees, there's going to be plenty of support for him. He is he's a Guineas winner. He's a really high class horse. That Golden Rose win was brilliant. He's one of the best the best articles from that Dubawi sire line. A full-time Group 1 winner. There's not that many of them about, and he's a beautiful looking horse. Everyone loved him last year. I think he'll go very well. I think he'll go terrifically well. He's got a lot of support behind him already. We do breeding rights in these stallions, so that that enables people, breeders to get in on the ground floor and have a lifetime interest in the horse. So, so that, and obviously, they back that with their support, and so he'll go very well, I'd say.
Yeah. And just a couple of others to sort of round off on, Alastair. I mean, Bivouac and Pinatubo look good value for breeders to be able to send their mares to this year. I mean, their stallions. Bivouac obviously mentioned Bowback before, but also Pinatubo with really strong horses coming through. It's a good time. Yeah, it's a good opportunity for breeders to sort of get in with those horses as well, isn't it? Given that they've already got runners on the ground.
Yeah, I think, Bivouac's doing a terrific job, and we've just, we're very conscious of the fact that that the market is quite selective these days, and there's a lot of stallions to choose from. So we've been very competitive on his price and Pinatubo's price, and likewise in Victoria, Brazen Bow. I mean, Brazen Bow's had a terrific last period. I mean, with numbers of stakes winners, he's always getting a new stakes winner or stakes horse around the place. I mean, we've got high hopes for Diameter come the spring. The way he rounded out his autumn campaign, he looks like a really proper horse in the making. So, delighted with him. And then Cylinder in Victoria. Everyone's raving. Everyone who's got a foal by Cylinder loves it. So, so there's a lot to look forward to.
Good, Alastair. Thanks so much for your time, and all the best for the breeding season and selling the noms and all the things you need to do.
Thank you. It's going to be a busy few months.
Yeah, plenty to talk out of that, Tim, and put in the context of Arrowfield's announcements this week. I mean, the Autumn Sun up to $137,500, including GST. It's probably about where we thought he would be, but I would think these big studs, Arrowfield, Coolmore, Newgate. I think Coolmore's later this week where they're announcing their fees. We've already had Newgate come out, as I mentioned. We've got Darley, obviously we're talking about. It just seems to me like the ones that are hot are going to get a premium put on them, and the rest are either held steady or definitely probably pulled down, Tim. It seems that's where the market is at the moment.
Well, it's very hard to get a successful stallion, as I said, just touched on 10 Taurus, ticks a lot of boxes for commercial returns, but to get a proven stallion is very difficult, and therefore that's why their fees go up, and the studs have got to try and maximise their value to run their farms out of those top stallions, because when one doesn't work, and a lot of them don't, unfortunately, it's just the way it works. The variance involved, that they lose money sometimes on those horses, so they've got to get it back through the good ones. And the Autumn Sun's that one. And speaking to John Massara on Wednesday, he thinks they've got a very balanced, well-priced roster. Morris is there at sort of reasonable prices. He's Massara JM's very, very big on lead artist, to son of Dubawi, Group 1 winner in Europe. He's sending some, he didn't say what they were exactly, but some mares that ordinarily would go to $200,000 stallions. So that says a bit of the belief he's got in lead artist, and it's compared him to Danehill previously as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting year, I suppose. Alastair spoke about the lack of, I guess, local talent retiring to the off the track this year, and the nature of the fact that Darley obviously won the Golden Rose, and they won the Coolmore, and they won the Derby as well. So they've won sort of the key races sort of going through. It sort of sets up a bit straight. And I guess going not left field, but going somewhere a little bit different. I mean, Arrowfield's strategy of the last couple of years has been really interesting to see, because we've seen Van Dijk, and Elite Artists, both shuttle stallions, come down to Australia, which wasn't really Arrowfield's model across the recent years, but needs must. And I think also Tim and Coolmore are definitely a big believer in this. The success of other stallions have allowed them to other shuttle stallions have given them the confidence to sort of bring these horses down here.
And it's just hard to source those colts off the track. Either they've been owned by the breeders like Godolphins, or the colt syndicates who are tied to studs. So it's just very hard to source. And to be fair to Arrowfield, they always have sort of, with the right shuttle stallion, way back to Danehill and things like that, always have sort of approached that. In Japan, of course, with Morris and different other stallions that they've had their relationships with the Yoshidas. So it's not new. They just got to find the right horse. And I think that leads into Cambridge stud as well. They've announced their fees. Sort of State, and son of Snitzel's gone to 50,000, and Cheyenne as well is a shuttle stallion from France, and he's a son of Dark Angel, same as Harry Angel. So they've really gone to that market, pursuing top class horses in Europe to bring down, because again, for New Zealand market, very hard to find those locally bred horses to stand at stud. They got sort of state probably cheaply, and he's done it. Started from the bottom up and now up to 50,000.
Yeah, and then the other one I want to mention too is Darlington, which is an interesting one because there's not that many outside the big studs, outside the Coolmore stud stakes and outside the Golden Rose and all that sort of stuff. There's not many entires that win sprint races in Australia that are sort of available to go to stud. Now, Royal Patronage is an interesting one. He's a son of Wooten Bassett, bred in France, which probably puts a little bit of a handbrake on his overall commercial appeal, Tim. But his record's pretty good, and I think this is a great get from Brent Atwell and the Darling View team to get a stallion. I mean, we spoke about it last week in the podcast, not knowing and probably not realising. We probably should have looked at the colours and worked it out that Brent had already bought into him. But it's a really interesting one. I think it's a good one for WA, and it probably shows the ambition that Brent and his team have got over there.
Yeah, someone did call me. I think they listened to the podcast and said, "Oh, WA, look at the change of colours." And I was like, "I know those colours," and called Brent, and it's like, "Oh, and of course, people leaks on social media. Anyway, we've got a story this week, and I agree. I think it is a great get. People have said the stallion game is a young person's game because it's so volatile and it's a long term. It's 5 years per stallion to find out if you've struck it lucky or not, or and ups and downs of stallions. But Brent's, with his father Clive, having a real crack. This is sort of the fourth stallion in probably 5 years. They did luck onto Playing God, buying him as sort of a semi-proven stallion, and he's gone on and Splintex and Lightsaber, and now Royal Patronage. I think he's got the right credentials. There is a lot of mile races over there, the sort of races that probably Bob Peters does and used to win a lot. If you can breed a local WA horse to sort of target those races, you'll get sprinter milers, 2,000 metre horses, I would suspect. I think it's a great get.
Speaking of ambition, I want to sort of touch on a stable you've got a bit to do with over the years, the Henry Dwyer stable, who have been busy at the breeze ups over there. Suddenly we've got, humble Henry, the kid from Ballarat, based from Ballarat and sort of working things out. And, suddenly he's out there mixing it with the big boys in the European sales rings, buying breeze up horses for Royal Ascot. I mean, it's an interesting development. I think what it does show is that while a lot of the big trainers in Australia are dominating and have their own thing, Henry is using his advantage, which is a smaller stable, which enables him to pivot and possibly create an opportunity to have effectively a dual hemisphere stable. This is a really interesting development in my mind.
It is. The one I've got with him, I think he's going to Werribee 2,200 metre benchmark 54 or something this week. So, there's polar opposites. But no, I think Henry's realised he's capitalised on he's always been a popular person. I think he's great fun to be around and have a chat with. But he's, with Osfura, he's ridden that wave and capitalised on it, getting European owners, Australian owners want to be involved. And I think longer term, those horses that he's bought in the last year and this year, the breeze up sales recently, he'll possibly bring back down to Australia. But at the moment, it gives those owners an opportunity to come to Royal Ascot. Hopefully, things go to plan. And he's bought a St Mark's Basilica. I think he bought a St Mark's Basilica at Magic Millions earlier this year as well. So he must have I reckon there must be a good one in the stable because he's sort of targeted that stallion a bit of Coolmore Shuttler. So hopefully can go on with it and have a bit of success over there and down here as well with those horses.
Yeah, he's got too darn hot as well. He's been a busy boy over there, Henry, and best of luck to him. The following segment is brought to you by Inglis. The progeny of Extreme Choice proved a market sensation at the recent Inglis Easter Yearling sale, and buyers will be afforded a significant opportunity to access his progeny at the Inglis Chairman's sale. The entry of both Hazelbrook and Sizzlefly means there will be a trio of mares carrying what are widely regarded as some of the most valuable pregnancies in the Australasian bloodstock market, joining fellow headline Newgate Farm mare Kiki Express. Also joining them is stakes perform mare Vestas. The English Chairman Sale has established itself as one of the premier breeding stock auctions in the world, consistently delivering world-class results for vendors and buyers alike. The 2026 edition will be held at Riverside on Thursday, May 7th, continuing its Where Elegance Meets Excellence theme with a late afternoon start at 4 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. To view the Chairman Sale catalogue, go to inglis.com.au. Tim, another subject probably close to our heart, without revealing too much, is the price of beers or the type of beers available at racetracks. This is an interesting one with the VRC announcing this week that they've moved away from Lion, who have been their supplier of choice for 25 years, back to to Asahi, who I guess probably known in Australia as Carlton Draft and those types of beers, Great Northern, which I know is a particular choice of yours, Tim. This, eh, I think this is a really interesting choice because we might sit there and say, "Hey, it's just a corporate choice. They had an opportunity to get at this and they got a better deal or whatever else." But the reaction on social media in particular, and mind you, social media can get over carried away with itself sometimes, has been very strong with the fact that you know VRC members and VRC attendees and Flemington attendees are delighted to see Carlton Draft likely to be back on taps at Flemington this spring.
Hopefully, there's a Carlton Dry 3.5 on tap there. I've sort of gone across to that recently. It seems to serve me well. Yeah, obviously, there's commercial arrangements there for the VRC to try and maximise return, but again, no downside to the VRC on that one. I don't think in terms of popularity, they do seem to have probably the most popular beers on tap and keep their punters happy and hopefully not too overpriced that everyone can go there and comparatively good value to going to a pub and watching the races there.
Yeah, and I think that there's a sort of, I guess, a sense that it enables people to have that similar experience. But I think it is significant, and I think I'm keen to catch up with Kylie Rogers the next couple of weeks. They've delivered a different catering supplier or hospitality supplier, and now a change in the beer landscape as well. There has been a few changes made at the VRC, which, as we indicated, probably 18 months ago, and sort of Kylie came to the job, I think September 2024. That there was a fair few changes to be made there. So I think these are key changes. It'll be interesting to see what the bottom line looks like. I wanted to reflect too, Tim, to the winning run of Jigsaw at the moment and sort of how this has captured the imagination. We all love champions and we all love cheering on Autumn Glow and seeing these big, that great results in the championships or whatever else. But in a world where there is plenty of opportunities, outside the top races and probably, at that next level, or whether it be Group 1 races or really rich sprint races, Jigsaw's done a remarkable job. 7 starts straight now, winning everywhere. Like Cindy Olsen hadn't won a Group 1 before the start of this year. Now she's won 2 in 2 different countries, plus a quokka. I mean, it's been probably the best story of the racing season so far, and I don't think it'll be surpassed in.
I think just, terrific placement, management to keep a horse sound for that long and I don't know what the turnaround's been, but just, again, good placement racing all through sort of spring and summer, and then even using a Vobis race. I think it was 200,000 effectively as a track gallop / barrier trial, the week before the William Reid and, picking up, I think Cindy owns majority of the horse as well. So it's a big financial kick along, but just you can't help but be excited for her when you listen to Cindy be interviewed. She's just engaging and loving the whole process of it all. The family's been around for horses a long time. I remember watching Sky Heights with Colin and things like that. That just a good racing family, you've got to say.
Yeah, and there's a reward for persistence. The horse didn't win a race for 2.5 years. And it just does show you, if you continue to persist with these horses, you can get there. And it's an interesting discussion around about the colts retiring early, but these geldings in particular, there's plenty of opportunities for them to keep on racing. And credit to Cindy for persisting with this horse. And he was running around in, I think, mile races and different type of races and whatever else. But hey, get him to the front. Give them every chance, make the rest of them run them down, and it gives a good opportunity. I just wanted a quick mention, Tim, interesting story out of the States this week of the rights to the Preakness Stakes, which is obviously the second leg of the Triple Crown, being sold to Churchill Downs Incorporated, which is the people who own the Kentucky Derby, obviously given its name. It just kind of probably gives a little bit of a view about the future of racing or where things sit and whether in a world where, the concept of clubs and whatever else becomes not as relevant from a consumer point of view and the way things are sort of commercialized, does this sort of precursor to the way that racing rights will be sold in the next 10, 15, 20 years? It's an interesting one. The race will remain, well, it's actually currently not at Pimlico. It's going to be at Laurel this year, but next year when they go back to Pimlico, it'll stay there, but effectively the rights will be leased back to the state of Maryland. So it does put up an interesting situation whereby, will there be at some point a sort of global move to buy up these big races? And we're seeing privatisation in many different aspects. We're seeing the discussion at the moment with the Big Bash and the sale of cricket rights and where that sits. And we've seen teams like the All Blacks sell their international IP rights to venture capital firms. Like, this is the reality we're living in, Tim, and I think racing probably needs to be ready for it, doesn't it?
Yes, I guess you could argue that racing probably needs to hopefully hold on to their vision or destiny. We see here with just trying to get access to Sky One and the importance that can play to the smaller states, Racing WA, going with racing.com to try and get greater TV access. Tas Racing sort of signing a 10-meeting deal with racing.com, I think, to try and get access. So the industry needs to try and keep control to some degree, I think, and otherwise you sort of, even, with the rugby league rights, wherever that ends up, there's potential to sell to stands and different online platforms. If you're not on the right ones, it can really damage the sport, and we've seen that with rugby union and different sports as well. So just in front of as many
soccer as
eyeballs
well,
as
Tim.
possible.
Try being a soccer fan in Australia at the moment, trying to follow 8 different leagues and 8 different streaming services. You're right with that. That is interesting, but I do feel like it's going to become an issue for racing moving forward. Speaking of residual values, the values of fillies and mares, and we've obviously got the Group 1 Robert Sangster this week. We've also got the Australasian Oaks, so it's a big week for Adelaide, and best of luck to the races in South Australia and the South Australian Jockey Club and sort of conducting their feature meetings over the next 3 weeks. This is their shop window. There's mares races. I mean, probably people might have had a little bit of a knock on sort of, fillies and mares, Group 1 races and where they sit. But tell you what, the value that come out of them, like this race itself has got I think 2 or 3 fillies headed, or 2 fillies headed to Royal Ascot probably, others headed to Sale. Recent winners of the race have sold for Climbing Star, sold for 2.1 million, Ruthless Dame sold for 2 million, Snap Dancer sold for 3.2 million, and Bella Vella 1.9 million after winning these races. I mean, it's quite a lucrative opportunity far beyond just the prize money for first place, isn't it, Tim?
And I think this year probably a greater example of that. I'm not sure Charmstone will go to market. I think that was bought by Seamus Mills, and Heath Newton as a longer term breeding prospect, but she'd be worth probably more than Snap Dancer, I'd suggest. So, that puts a value on it. Generosity is an interesting one. She is entered for the chairman's sale. Ricky Soros Jr. said that's still the case, but they've also harbour ambitions to go to Royal Ascot. I think it all hinges on how she runs this weekend, and she's by divine profit. I think Simon Miller and his mates, Xavier Franklin, paid, I think, 9,000 for her as a weanling. When she won 800,000 for them, or similar, something like that. A few stakes races then sold privately, probably for a significant amount of money, and B2B thoroughbreds as the races have also done well out of it. So pretty much everyone's won except for the breeder at $9,000 weanling.
Just ask Simon Milliby's record with weanlings, he'll tell you, but he has got a great record of buying those horses as at weanlings. On to wagering now, Tim, and I just want to mention a story which we're sort of digging into at the moment. Now, been some changes at Sportsbet currently being reported in other outlets as about 4% of their workforce, around about 50 people. Others have told me it's 100, but I'm just digging into those details at the moment. But it's the reality of the wagering industry at the moment. Things have changed a fair bit. We've seen significant changes at Entain in the last 12 months. We've seen changes. We lost about 100 jobs. We saw Tabcorp go through this. This is the natural corporate cycle, the way things work. But it's certainly probably, these big wagering organisations are in expansion mode. They're in consolidation mode, and that's going to mean there's probably going to be fewer people working with them, combined with the fact that AI and everything else. Albeit Tab are keen to continue to pursue things in play betting, getting a boost this week with approval to them to use that the technology they've got to sort of tap in play betting. I think it's called Tab Live now, where you can bet live in play. Tim, from your perspective, like the retail venue or the retail sort of reinvention we've spoken about a bit with Tabcorp, where does this sit within that? Do you feel like there's going to be people betting in pubs, more people are going to be betting live in play, given they're able to do that on their apps, sitting in front of TV screens at pubs and clubs and venues around Australia? Do you think it's how big is the upside, do you feel?
I'm not sure how big it is. They'll definitely get more people punting instead of having to call up. That's just too hard. And obviously we know the corporates have tried to get around that legislation in the past and sort of failed or been fined for it. Look, I guess if you're there in the pub and Tabcorp is sort of pushing that with tab times and having Saturdays, and the footy's on, maybe you will try and don't like cash out or take the other side and bet that way. Maybe there is some upside. I've never probably been an in-play footy or sport punter really at all anyway. So to me, it probably doesn't appeal to me a lot, but I'm sure there is some upside, particularly with just the rise of sports betting.
The last topic I wanted to chat with you, Tim, is it's interesting to see the New Zealand turnover figures for the both for their biggest month, probably close to their biggest month of the year around the Champions Day with the NZB Kiwi. Obviously, there was a short price favourite in the NZB Kiwi, which probably suppressed markets there, but I think it went from about 1.37 to around $1 million turnover. The other major races sort of dropped as well. I think it was 7.7% across the month of March. Now, Entain New Zealand's managing director, Sam Moncur, said had a lot to do with changing behaviour, that people are moving more towards fixed odds, which have a different sort of weight in them than sort of tote betting, and that's sort of one of the reasons why they're seeing seeing the drop off. But their margins are still pretty good, which happy to take that on face value. But I think put into the broader context around with the conversation we've had with New Zealand racing, Tim, it probably does add a bit of interesting. I guess there's a few question marks being raised over there about sort of where this future direction of this Entain stuff goes and where that sits. So it certainly does. When I saw those numbers yesterday, it certainly did sort of, raise my eyebrows slightly.
Well, I've done a couple of stories on New Zealand, and people just still want to keep reaching out on depending which side you're on, and talk to other people who I'd like to think probably hold a more balanced view that something NZTR are doing what they're doing, and then there's the agitators on the other side, or the advisory board to the minister, Winston Peters. There just seems to be a lot happening there. It's hard to get your head around sometimes, and when and it happens here in Australia with state governments having racing ministers. These ministers have other portfolios, and in New Zealand at the moment, there's a sort of a leadership. The Prime Minister's under pressure, and Winston's sort of focusing on that rather than racing. And there is reports that he has to lay eyes on, and maybe that causes some change. I'm not sure, but there's just and that sort of how Entain functions as well, or the race scheduling and things like that. All those little things that can help or diminish turnover are all sort of up in the air, or not up in the air, but they could be altered depending who's in charge, and different opinions as well. And I'm not saying who's right or wrong.
Yeah, it probably does summarise a bit of an interesting sort of state around. I guess we've gone to the point of the sugar hits voluntarily gone in terms of the vibe around New Zealand racing, which is kind of interesting in itself. So, but I do take Sam Moncur's points at face value that it's a changing market, albeit that they do naturally have a monopoly effectively over there thanks to the legislative net. So there's a bit to play out over there. I guess watch this space is the best way to describe it. Okay, thanks for joining on Straight Talk, brought to you by Darley in English, our wonderful sponsors. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you're listening to our podcast, and be sure to subscribe. Send us an email, editor@thestraight.com.au. Yeah, let us know who'd you like us to talk to, any interview subjects, anything else. And thanks for your time. We'll talk to you again next week.